All right. So this is part two, hierarchy and mechanics. And yeah, in this one, I'm pretty much just going to cover just a little bit more about a quick recap of structure and just kind of how it works and a little bit of an example. So let's get started. So to recap, objects, characters, weapons, all those kinds of things, kitchen sink, they all have decals, shaders, particles, sounds. Some have damage effects, some have like sound effects or visual effects. Couldn't think of anyone for purple because I have a nice rainbow here. And sometimes what you'll have is two weapons might use, the same damage. You might have you might have two decals that use the same bitmap. So one second, maybe I'll do this. So you have two things, two decals, one red, one blue. They both use the same bitmap, which is kind of like an overlay. It's usually a grayscale overlay. But then they use different shaders, for example. So then maybe, or they use the same shader even. So that's just kind of what I wanted to just quickly recap, just kind of saying that these things are linked. They're not all independent of one another, and sometimes they kind of loop back to each other. But I digress. Moving forward, I wanted to give an example of how hierarchy works, and this is going to be more apparent in, what is that, episode 5, or maybe even later, where I talk about like AI characteristics and character tags and stuff. But pretty much how it works is you have the folder file system, and sometimes you have, all of these different files, and they're not related to each other. They're like separate from each other, right? So you have like one dot string is just kind of like the, in quotations, file type I decided to use. It's fictional. And so there's like all of these things. So there's generic dot string, one dot string, 2, 3, 4. You get the idea. And one dot string, its parent is set to the generic. So what that means is this string has a green modifier for its first value. Let me just maybe do this. It has a green modifier for its first one, and then it's going to pull from the generic string for the rest. And same with this one. So 2, we have, it's going to pull the gray, but it has these modifiers. 3, it's going to pull from a generic, except we deleted the last one, the last modifier. And then 4, its parent is actually string 1. Oh boy. And, sorry, ignore that quick little edit. Its parent is string 1, so it's going to pull from string 1, which pulls from generic string, and it's going to have these modifiers. So what does that end up looking like? You can pause the video if you're that kind of person and try and work it out on your own to figure out what these colors are going to be. It's not super hard, but here we go. So we have green A, B, C, orange A, green B, blue C, and then here we're not going to have anything because we deleted that. And so there's a difference between deleting something and leaving something blank, and I'll show you kind of more about that again in episode 4 and 5, where we talk about the generic and specific character tags. But this is really just to highlight the importance of how the tag hierarchy works, and that's just kind of like I wanted to call them smaller strings, but like the further into a file you go, the more specific it is, and the further out you go, the more generic it is. So Um, to use an example of like painting a car, you know, if you go to the highest folder and like the car is green, great. But then if you go into like specific folders like doors, and then you want the doors to be blue, you would, you know, that's kind of like, say you want the whole car to be green, and that means all the doors are going to be green. It's 4 doors. And then you go, you know, into the doors portion, and you want the doors to be blue but the body green. And then let's say you want 2 doors to be red, and you want yeah, so this is kind of what's going on here. So like you're saying, paint the whole car green, the doors are going to be blue, and then two of the doors are going to be red. So what you're going to end up having is a car that is green, one door is going to be blue, the other one's going to be, there we go, this will be better, red, and blue. So that's just kind of like a graphical representation of how a hierarchy works. That is that, and then, okay, now this is why it's important to understand these hierarchies, because when something happens in the game, and like that's an action. Now, action, you have to, like, say for example, you have, you know, like let's say you have a Wraith, you know, and a Spartan Laser. So the Wraith has vitality properties, it's made of certain materials, it has certain damage seats, and it also has like various other properties about it. Now, the Spartan Laser, it's a type of damage. It's going to do a certain amount of damage. It's going to have a damage type, which interacts with materials, and it's also going to have its own properties relating to like transfer damage and such. All of these things combine in a big explosion. Not actually, it's not that exciting. But all of these things combine together to get your response. So this is why the tags are also like separate from each other, is because they take from each area, right? That way, you know, you don't have to have in the Spartan Laser tag, well, this is the damage it's going to do to, like, you know, a Wraith, because all of these things, you know, like, because the responses are complicated, and like I'm lacking the words to describe this. I hope the visual is enough. Because, you know, now if I were, for example, to shoot an assault rifle, you know, given the amount, type, and properties, you're going to get a different response. Same thing, you know, if you were to use a, let's see, like, say a grunt, right? And let's use the same Spartan Laser example. You're going to have a different response based on all of these things. That's pretty much just what I'm trying to say, is like these tags and these values work together to get you what you see in game. Okay, that was episode 2. How things kind of work a little bit better. Episode 3 is going to be about weapons, projectile, and damages, so we'll actually look more about this side of the equation. And then the episode after that, I'm going to be talking about this side of the equation. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the power of the generic .character tag, globals, and how globals can like do everything related to, oh yeah, and then difficulty settings too. Yeah. Anyways, a lot of stuff goes into the response, but I'm going to break it down for you in the next few episodes. Okay, thanks for watching.